Welcome back to the Single Dad's online podcast, Online Dad, and I am the Online Dad. My last podcast focused on the impact of COVID-19 on single parenting or single dads specifically. And this podcast, I just want to focus on coping with COVID in general. So this would be for all families that are out there that I can't imagine anybody who's not been impacted by COVID-19 worldwide. So with life becoming just that much more complicated with COVID-19, and we're going on month number 8 now with it, the loss of our mobility, our freedom, our routine, how our children are educated, our livelihood, and even people who are sick or died from COVID-19 or any other type of life-altering illness. So where do you begin to process all of this as adults? If you're struggling with this, just imagine how your kids are struggling with it. Okay, all the changes, processing every single one of those changes that have hit them. And if you have adolescent children, developmentally, it's all about them and how it's impacting them and them only, and may not be able to see that great big picture of life in general, especially during those milestones like graduation and prom and the championship game. All that stuff ripped away that we've gotten used to or entitled to because we've earned it has now been taken away from us. And while your adolescent children might be focused on only how it's impacting them, and that might frustrate you as a parent, you got to remember developmentally that's where they're at. And we were all there. And if you said, no, I never did that, yeah, you did. If your parents are still alive, talk to them. You did. So if you're struggling with it as an adult who's experienced a lot more life than your kids, and you're struggling how to make this all work, then imagine what your kids are going through. Bing defines emotional loss as the experience of varied human emotions equated with no longer having either something or someone, possibly someplace in which the greatest effect is not much material, but emotional. Emotional loss, which is triggered by the significant change of anything from a job, your routine, an illness, physical separation, either by choice or circumstances like death, divorce, deployment, deportation, incarceration of a parent or other close family member. Many first responders choose to stay away from their families as not to unintentionally infect them with COVID-19. How do we cope with the loss and how long it takes for you to work through these emotions is all based on the severity of the loss experienced. Social distancing or even sheltering in place may be more of an inconvenience, but it's still a loss. Remember, a loss is anything that you've had that's been taken away from you, usually not by society. So we're gregarious people by nature. We need to be out. We need to be interacting. We need to shake hands, hug, socialize. That's just part of human nature. And now that's even been severely curtailed to FaceTime and telephone calls and Zoom, but it's still not the same. We need that personal one-on-one interaction. You may be even able to cope with this because you know in your head it's temporary. As soon as we get a vaccine, as soon as we get a treatment, this is all going to change. And you know what? You're right, but it's still impacting right now. When something like the death of a loved one due to COVID-19 or a loss that's more permanent, this loss is far more intense and harder to cope with than on the short term. Now, grief and loss, the grieving process is that loss. Traumatic loss is something that has impacted you on a level that's never been felt before. And even all your life experiences you've had in your life, nothing ever prepares you when you have this traumatic loss. Nothing. So that's why coping with this disease, not only on the level of the disease and what it's done to us socially, but those of us that have lost family members to COVID-19, especially if you can't go to hospital and be with them when they pass away, is a major emotional kick in the head. You can even have multiple minor emotional losses that could have had a greater impact, as there are many changes that happen at once and could hamper the ability to cope. So experts tend to say that human beings can handle one major negative impact in their life a year. You know, whether loss of a job, that loss of graduation, one major loss. But when you lose somebody to a major traumatic loss like death, divorce, abandonment, like I said, deployment, natural disaster, anything like that, that's the equivalent of seven major losses in 1 year. So when you struggle, when you lose your job, or you struggle because something negative has happened to you and it's altered the way you have to operate your life, when you go through a traumatic loss like a death or a divorce or a natural disaster, that's the equivalent of 7 of those in 1 year. So if you're struggling to cope with one thing, you can imagine when you add that traumatic loss, it makes it even that much more intense and that much more difficult to work through. Children will tend to struggle more because they've not had as many life experiences to help them cope with that loss. As parents, we may not only help develop coping mechanisms to handle those changes, but we also guide our children through those changes. So what I want to do now is give you some basic steps to help you cope with this change with COVID-19, to help you work through processing the loss. Every family dynamic is different, so I'm giving you a list of ideas, and that's all they are, ideas. And if they don't work as written and they can work modified into your family dynamic, then do it that way. Don't try and incorporate all of these at once, because your kids are going to look at like, what the heck happened and what did mom or dad just read? So just take one, start with one and see how that works. And you know what? You're going to get some resistance to that as well. It's yet another change. But if you want your family and that includes you to successfully navigate this emotional trauma of what COVID-19 has done to us, and even though we know at some point it's going to end, but we still have to deal with it in the here and now, especially in America right now where there's an election year and everything is highly politicized and everybody's on both sides of the coins of this issue. You just don't know where to go. So these strategies are kind of help with the family dynamic directly and working with what life is throwing at you currently. Right, first and most importantly is acknowledge the change of the loss. Don't trivialize the feelings, whether those feelings are realistic or unrealistic. Don't trivialize them, because especially to your kids, that's important to them. So if your adolescent son or daughter is making a big deal out of not being able to go to graduation, don't trivialize it and say, oh, there's people dying of this disease and you're worried about graduation. Yes, that's true. But don't trivialize it. And what you're doing is you're belittling what they're thinking or feeling. And if you want your kids to be able to share with you and to talk with you about things that they're struggling with, that's usually not a way to do that. Yes, it gives perspective in the reality, but it also trivializes their feelings. Just remember, emotions are neither good or bad. They just are. Our children need your support, not the criticism. Second thing you can try and do is listen. Great word. And it's hard for parents because we want to be quick with the advice, quick to fix. But one of those key things to being a good proactive parent is to listen. One of the best ways to help cope with a loss is not to fix it or give advice, rather listen and reaffirm their feelings. You know, when you have a traumatic loss, they talk about needing to tell that story 30 times. So it's tell the same person 30 times, tell 2 people 15 times, tell 5 people 3 times, but they've got to tell that story. And as a parent, you may have to hear that story more than once. And I know in the back of your head, you've got more things going on. You don't need to hear the story again. But as a parent, that's part of the responsibility you took on, is they need to tell it again. And you don't need to say, yeah, I heard it. And we've had this discussion already. That's not going to help to shut them down. They need to get it out. Okay. The next step you might want to consider is empathize instead of sympathize. Putting you in their shoes and relating to how they are feeling goes a lot further than giving pity or trying to fix it or assign blame. There's enough blame to go around from the disease, and again, because it's highly politicized, we are struggling to try and find that middle ground. So don't sympathize, but empathize. Don't try and blame anything. Try and say, okay, I empathize with what you're going through. How do we work through this together? Because it's not going to change. The car gets wrecked, and now you don't have a car to go back and forth to and fro, and you might have to Uber, you might have to borrow a car, you might have to depend on a ride. And and to blame the guy that hit you, or blame the stoplight that didn't work while your life is turned upside down, it's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to help you work through it. So empathy instead of sympathy is usually a better choice. The next suggestion, engage your family in strategies to help cope with the change. It allows your children to take ownership of their own feelings and learning to cope as well as the feelings they contribute to the solution. So what it's saying is, get the family involved and how to strategize to work through these changes in our lives. Social distancing, how we grocery shop, how we go from point A to point B, the family vacation that may not happen now. As a parent, you need to facilitate this more than direct the discussion. Remember, as parents, you have more life experiences to pull from, but part of building your kids' life experiences is let them troubleshoot collectively as a family to come up with a suggestion. And as a facilitator, you can guide them into those solutions, not necessarily to shoot them down or say that won't work, but say, okay, let's talk more about that. And then the pros and cons. And what you're doing is you're helping them problem solve. So as they get older and other things impact their life, especially as adults, they're already going to have some of those coping strategies in them to help work through it. Limit television, reading, radio, social media, etc. regarding COVID-19. It's very good to stay informed, but COVID-19 is nothing positive. Let's just be honest. It's nothing positive about it. So too much negativity is not helping either. So it's important that you have your children listen to the information with you, the parent, and you can answer any questions that might arise. Keep it all age appropriate, and remember, vet your information. Unfortunately, information can be subjective, facts twisted, politicized, or just plain inaccurate. So your families all have access to social media, and probably your social media use has increased because of shelter in place and not being able to do things. You've got to limit it, and then you've got to engage your children, because if you're finding it online, they're finding it online. And just as I had said, many times ago in other video discussions and workshops that I've given, is the internet is a great tool, but it's also just as bad. So while you have 6 million websites that show the impact of the Holocaust during World War II, you have just as many websites out there that say the Holocaust didn't happen. So that's why, as a parent, you need to be sure that the information that your kids are getting into, and right or wrong, good or bad, that you have that discussion. You have that discussion with your kids about what they're reading. And like I said, if you found it, then maybe that's a great time to bring that into discussion, because chances are they found it. Keep routines like chores, homework, etc. the same. These routines tend to help levels of normalcy among the changes and can work as a temporary distraction. And if you've never had your kids do chores because you didn't want the fight, you want them to focus more in school, whatever the reason is, chores are a great thing for a distraction. Not only does it help them take pride and ownership of your house and living there, also teaches them life skills, doing dishes, doing laundry, how to vacuum, how to dust, how to mow the lawn, how to pick up dog waste in the yard. All of those things, wash the car inside and out. All of those things teach life skills and also acts as a distraction. So if you've never done chores before, you might want to think about it. Even the youngest is 2 or 3, can feed the dog or cat, can dump the trash if it's not too heavy, make their beds. So you want to keep those routines, and it's a form of distraction. And as I said, if you've never done chores before, to create a list of chores and hand them out to all your kids may not be the way to do it, but to slowly introduce it. Another suggestion is avoid unstructured or unlimited access to social media, texting, gaming, or other type of internet time unless it's supervised. I'm not saying you can't have additional time, but it's not a substitute for more constructive activities and conversation. As I said earlier, there's a lot of misinformation that your grieving child may stumble upon. Next suggestion. Encouraging journaling about their thoughts, their feelings of the loss. Younger children may not be able to express themselves in words, so have them draw pictures and explain them to you. If they feel comfortable sharing with you, then listen, don't judge, and if they prefer to keep it private, you must respect that also. So when my father passed away back in 2002, my mother gave me a journal, and I knew what it was for. And I knew what she was trying to do, but what she said to me was, you've had a lifetime with your dad, and a lot of the reasons why he is dying is because of his choices. So you might want to consider writing these down. So, yeah, I took it. Thanks, Mom. And I was laying in bed, and I really couldn't sleep, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to try this. My dad hadn't passed away yet. He was still very sick. And so I took the journal and started writing. And I wrote in that journal probably daily. And then after he passed away, I probably did it, every couple of days, and then it moved into weekly, and then maybe monthly, and eventually just kind of tapered off. But when I reread the journal, I realized how much it helped me work through those feelings. Because, for me, my mom had already heard it, and a lot of my friends heard what was going on. And I felt like I was burdening those same people by talking to them about it again. So that's why I started to journal. And, sometimes kids, they'll trust their peers, but they won't necessarily trust the adults that are important in their lives, their parents, their teachers, their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents. So the journaling is a great way to do that, is a great way for them to get those feelings out. And I'll be honest with you, once they get them out on paper, it may become easier for them to talk to you about it, which leads to my next point, is if you are a parent whose children are not living with you, make sure you reach out to them regularly. Yes, text and email work, but try and make voice contact. FaceTime, Zoom, especially if part of their loss is missing a parent who's not living with them, it goes without saying it is good for the parents too. The next one, and you might be doing this already and may already have done it, but I am still surprised how many people don't do it. Use at least one meal per day, usually dinner, to engage in conversation without interruptions. Shut off the phones, put them on mute, put them in a basket away from the table, and that includes the parents. If you are waiting on an important phone call, an important text from work or something going on, and it's dinner time, then maybe alter the conversation for the day, because if it gets a real intense conversation and then your phone goes off, kind of diminishes the point. So you want to make sure your phone's and there's no distraction while at the table. Those discussions always lead by example. Sometimes if you share your feelings first, your children will follow your example. Keep it age appropriate when sharing feelings, even when questions come your way. And it is never a blame game, rather reinforcement of circumstances beyond your control. You can agree that the loss is bad and not their fault, but equally important is reassuring that things will get better, especially if you try to include them in that solution. So you start with yourself, how you're thinking and feeling. If you haven't had these conversations with your kids before, again, it's not just something you turn on a switch and say, hey, we're going to now. It could be something as simple as, how are you guys feeling about what happened with shelter in place? And you're going to get a lot of shoulder shrugs. You might get a lot of, I don't know, it is what it is. So start with your own feelings. And it still may not get a lot of conversation that particular time. But as you do that and share how it's thinking and feeling to you, your kids are saying, all right, well, Dad's sharing with me, Mom's sharing with me, it might be okay for them to share. And they'll start with nuggets, and they'll see if that comes back to bite them or how they're going to react to it. And if it seems to be an onus on you or an attack on you because of the rules you created because of COVID, don't take it personally and don't lash back. Just take it in, thank them for sharing. You can respect and say, well, I'm not sure I agree with you. Tell me more about that. And let them vent and get it out. And remember, when they're going through the grieving process, anger is part of that. A lot of that is misplaced anger, where they're blaming other people and other things for their circumstances. So, prom. They might have had some sort of social distancing prom that you still weren't comfortable with, so they weren't going. So they're going to blame you for it. So don't take it as a personal attack on you. Just take it as that there's a bunch of emotions they're trying to work through, and it starts with you. When you're a single parent or you've gone through that traumatic loss like a death or divorce, that tends to be a norm. Well, you divorced mom or you divorced dad, and because of that, I'm not in my bedroom. And because of that, I have to, every other weekend, I have to be here. So as single parents, we tend to get used to that if you're having those conversations. With COVID-19, remember, as you as the adult have to make the choices. So you're making choices that prevent your kids doing from what they want to do. The blame is on you. Well, it isn't COVID-19. It's because you won't let me go out. You won't let me go to the public swimming pool. You won't let me go play with my friends. So you just got to take it in. It's okay to cry. Kids may break down crying. They may walk away from the table in anger because you're not giving them the answers they want. Let them walk away from the table. Let them go into the room or wherever they're going to think. And then give them about 10 or 15 minutes and just go in there with as much support as you can for your children. Hug them, Listen to them. I'm sorry that I upset you. Can you tell me why you're so angry or why you feel this is my fault? And just take it all in. But it starts the process of discussion. Starts the process of communication. And it's going to go a long way, especially with your younger kids when they become adolescents and they become more private because parents don't get it anymore. And again, I'll remind you as parents, remember how dumb we thought our parents were when we were teenagers. You know, when our parents talk about when gas was $1 a gallon, or we talk about back in our day, and, you know, our kids roll their eyes. Well, we did the same thing to our parents. Yeah. Gas was a nickel a gallon. So it plays on itself. So again, empathize, don't sympathize, listen, and start with yourself. An apology goes a long way, whether you feel it's deserved or not, than accusatory or simply defending yourself. Because when you talk to your children age appropriately about what's going on, that means you're treating them as an intelligent individual, and they're going to respect that. Doesn't mean they're always going to be right. Doesn't mean they're always going to get what they want. But you're acknowledging and listening to what they have to say. So, again, these are just suggestions to help you navigate the negative circumstances that take away or change or modify your lifestyle. Learning to cope with these life's bumps in the road is crucial to surviving the pain we feel when we experience traumatic loss. Always remember to say, I love you. Even when you're angry, say, I love you. Include a hug whenever possible. COVID-19, we'll probably have a treatment, within the next 3 to 6 months. Eventually, things will start to return back to normal, but it's not going to be all at once. And we still have several more months of COVID-19 impact in our lives. And even after the vaccine comes out, that impact is still going to be felt for many more months to come until everybody can be vaccinated and everybody seems to be moving forward with this. Visit my website, www.singledadsonline.org, for more information regarding grief and loss and how to cope. Feel free to email me with any questions you may have that's more specifically to your family. And I hope this was a helpful podcast for you to understanding what you as a family may be going through. And remember, as a family, you are a unit. So it's not just mom or dad against the world, or mom and dad against the world. It's mom and dad and the children against the world. You're doing this together. When all is said and done and when all else is taken away, what you have left is family. And it's important to take that foundation of family and nurture it and encourage it and correct it when necessary. And remember, there's a reason why you are a parent until your kids are at least 18 years of age. So they need your guidance. They need your support. They love you unconditionally. And even when you have to make the bad decisions or the negative decisions or the decisions they don't want, that's fine. They need boundaries, and your kids are always going to push those boundaries. With COVID-19, you're kind of at the mercy of other people's boundaries in order to redefine your family dynamic. And even as an adult, it frustrates us. And even if you're an adult listening to this podcast that doesn't agree with what's going on, it's still out there. It's still the current normal in our society. So we have to teach our kids that coping mechanisms to help work through it. So when things start getting back to normal, you've now taught a bunch of life skills, not only to yourself, but also to your kids. And your kids might surprise you what may come out of those discussions. So have a great day. You're awesome parents. And I look forward to hearing your comments and look forward to my next podcast.